Most of the cable television systems in the U.S. have a few channels which are made free to members of the community. These public access channels may be a nuisance to some of the cable franchisers, but they are the law in many cities. And I'm delighted to have as one of my guests today, a figure who has played a major role in the development of public access television in America. George Stoney is one of the most influential and admired film and video producer, directors, and teachers in the United States. He's programmers. Jill Keefe is Executive Director of Local TV, Inc., one of the newest entries into the public access arena, located on Eastern Long Island. She was one of the original applicants to the FCC for a low-power franchise, and through her work in that area, she became aware of the need for an access channel in East Hampton, Long Island. George, welcome back, and Jill, welcome. Delighted to have you. This is such, most people know the word public access television, but they really don't have the foggiest idea of what it's all about. Can you summarize it in 2 minutes, as you've been asked to do on previous occasions?
Well, it's an extension of our freedom to speak. Since 80% of the American public gets most of its news and information by television, our feeling is that we should have a right to use those channels to speak for ourselves. And cable television makes this possible because there are many channels, not one for each system. Mm-hmm. And so since the late 60s, this idea has been experimented with. In 1972, the FCC actually mandated access for many cable systems. And while the FCC no longer requires that, New York State does require it, many other states require it, and many, many more local franchises require public access.
George, you struggled with dozens of perhaps hundreds of these public access channels in their infancy. One of the trickiest questions I remember is always letting members of the community know that this resource is there, mm-hmm. how you do that, how you remind them, how you hope to get them involved. How are you dealing with that in your very recent beginning situation in Eastern Long Island?
We are going on the air every day at this point with a daily calendar 3 times a day at scheduled times, and we've done publicity. The cable company has put an insert in the bills. We have to rely a lot on print.
Publicity, of course, in local media, like the local newspaper
Yeah,
and
because
so on?
we have a weekly newspaper. That's all that serves that area. We have to rely on print to begin with because there's never been a public access channel. Mm-hmm. Word of mouth and being visible, covering community events and letting people know that for the first time there is this kind of...
What would be an example of some of the community events you're covering now?
We cover the town board meetings. We cover, let's see, next week we'll be doing, I think, a fair that's taking place, mm-hmm. Special hearings on zoning problems. If a community group is holding a lecture series, art barge series we cover normally, which is a guest artist that comes in, and, you know, meetings that are open to the public where they've asked us to come, and then we can have the right to air them later.
In a minute, we're going to look at a clip of some of the things that you folks have been doing. Is this a series of the samples, or is it something designed as an on-air piece to get people to realize what the channel will offer?
No, this clip is just the first week, the 3 shows that we ran the first week, a tiny section of each one of them. We went on the air June 2nd for the first time as a regular scheduled weekly show, mm-hmm. and so these are 3 examples of that.
All right, well, we'll look at a tape of a series of those tapes right now from the new channel in East Hampton, Long Island.
Market itself. The meeting was opened by Joseph Jeremita, an attorney working on behalf of commercial fishermen.
It's alleged on information and belief that many of these people would like to see the fishing closed down for commercial purposes, and therefore that they helped in the study, and since we don't know exactly where the fish are caught, we're alleging on information and belief that these fish were caught in areas where they would get a very high PCB level. They call these hot fish.
The DEC's worked very closely with the sports fishermen, in particular the Save Our Stripers people, in all of this PCB testing and in coming up with a proposed policy on how to deal with contaminants in fish.
Hello, I'm Elaine Benson, and we're sitting on the porch of my house. and it's an auspicious occasion because today we are launching the 8th annual Steinbeck Project preview book fair. And this is something that's been great fun to do. Fortunately, I have with me the person who is very directly related to the inspiration for it all, Elaine Steinbeck, Mrs. John Steinbeck. And Elaine, tell us a little bit about how you and John came to this part of the world.
Well, when we married, we moved to the city, and that didn't take very long to wear off. John decided he had to be near the sea, and I called it Cannery Row East for a while because he grew up on the sea in California, so we came out here, and 30 years ago this month.
And to Sag Harbor.
We moved out to Sag Harbor, yeah.
The third piece is town board meetings, which we have been doing for the last 3 years, but because we didn't have an access channel, we couldn't air them. So we've been visible, but we hadn't been seen on the air, but the public knew we were there, and they were very supportive of that. And this is the first one that we've broadcast now. And we got a lot of good response and good feedback from that. And
When you say you were visible before,
This was the legislative intent.
Okay. Very good. Just put on the end where it's physically possible to add it. You've got a whole page. Just further resolve that, let's get the second number.
106.2. Or sorry, 106.3.
Shall we table this, Russell, and you write that on there, we'll come back to it?
One with the,
I have a bunch here, so you're gonna find it.
why don't you bring that one back?
Is that all you had?
That's it.
Oh,
Councilman King, do you have a resolution to offer?
move that about.
what's impressed us the most, the Bayman, that little clip you saw, they came in, they raised funds, they produced a show about the issue about striped bass and contamination, which was very important to them, and the feedback on that was, why didn't we do this earlier? Well, they didn't do it earlier because we weren't there earlier, and there was no access for them earlier. But it reached a very large group that normally would not be either interested or aware of what the problems were, and that's been true of any kind of community meeting we've covered. It's an enormous tool of information, and it's easy.
George Stoney and Jill Keefe, thank you very much indeed. This is Stephen Scheuer for All About TV. Thank you for being with us, and we hope you'll be watching next week at the same time.